All right, Troy, now we've worked through the promotions for Christmas, and hopefully we're going to draw a lot of people to the services. But now I want to begin to talk about the programming, the actual service itself, the experience around the service. And it would seem, if we're going to be intentional about this, that we really need to know what the win is before we begin programming. In other words, is the win to draw as many of the people that are already connected to the church or from other churches? That's probably one type of program. Is the win to draw people who don't currently attend church? That's another program. Is the win to gather as many people at the services themselves, or is the win to get people to come back in January? It would seem that you need to know what the win is before you can begin to think about what does the service and what does the experience need to look like.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think all of those things are good, and you can accomplish a lot of those to some degree. But for me, traditionally, and this everyone has to define it for themselves, but for me, it's always been about reaching people and how can we use this to connect people into the life of the church and share the gospel, share the life-changing message of Jesus in a creative, compelling way, and open their eyes to church. So, yes, we want a ton of people there, but we want to use that to leverage the new year and to connect more people into the church. That's always my thing, especially if I'm going to take time away from my family. I need to have that vision and mission that drives me.
So here's where we begin to wrestle with some things too, because you and I have been with some churches that are pretty contemporary, more modern, I guess, in how they would approach programming. But it seems like there's something about Christmas that just demands we do some traditional stuff too. I mean, how do we wrestle with the tension of that?
Well, you got to know your community. And now that I've worked at a few different churches, I realized, no, not all people are the same. And you've got to really dial into what your unchurched community looks like and feels like. But I do believe that by and large, most people, they like it to look different. I think you can put that contemporary spin on things, whatever contemporary means. But people love the tradition of Christmas, and they love the warm fuzzies of that. It seems so old school, but I have seen candle lighting work with just the guitar or a piano at the end of the service, and people eat it up, and they love it. They love the experience of that. So I think you've got to build that in. They need something familiar that makes them feel at home, and I think it's a good thing to do.
So with that, then, help me understand your philosophy of how much should these services look like the typical weekend services, or at what level should there be some distinction?
Well, a lot of churches take a different approach to this, and I'm not sure there's a right or wrong way. I have always loved the approach of giving them a sample of what we're already like. So if it becomes the variety show, I think that's good, and it does have value. I mean, I'm not going to say it doesn't, but when they show up next year, it's going to look a lot different. And so I think it's always good to just kind of show a little bit of what you do, maybe a little amped up, with just a little more pizzazz. It's important for them to hear your pastor speak and get tuned into him and who he is and what he's all about, to just get a feel for the life of the church.
Which also then brings us to a couple questions related to resources, people resources and financial resources for something like this. And Troy, I think you would agree, what I have seen is these opportunities when we're trying to pull off all the stops for the Christmas Eve services, as an example, really does create a great opportunity, not only for all the staff to get engaged, but for you to be encouraging new people to connect in serving opportunities. And this could be a chance for you to give people a first taste of what serving's like, volunteering's like in the church.
Yeah, I've seen that happen so much because you do need more volunteers to cover all the different services you may do for Christmas Eve. And so it does provide some entry points for people that may have just been kicking tires, and letting them know about that with, it's a one-off, that there's no commitment. It's just show up and greet people, hand out some candy canes, and have a good time. And what I found is it's a very festive environment if you do it right, and people love it. They love the experience that for so many, serving on Christmas Eve becomes part of their tradition, with even with their families and part of the whole experience.
Okay, so that helps with people resources, but what about those of us that have tight budgets? How can we tackle something like this where we do want to kind of take things to a different level, but we just don't have the financial resources to pull it off?
Well, I think most of us are working under tight resources these days, so I think it is wise to try to put more money toward a Christmas service if you can angle your budget a bit. I do believe that you do have more return with Christmas services because you just have more people come through the building. I would always take an offering, however your church works with that, but that's another opportunity, and for a lot of churches, it's another 3 or 4 opportunities to pass the plate. So it should help that bottom line somewhat. But what I would do is just maximize whatever budget you have to make it excellent. I think people appreciate something that's quality more than wow, or all the flashing lights and all of the creative um, bells and whistles that you could do. Dial it back, go simple, but make it great. And if people love the quality of it, I think that will speak volumes to people. And I think you can get smart about ways to do things a little less expensive, but in a quality excellent way.